Judge President of the Supreme Court of Appeals today still being interviewed for the role of Chief Justice. Let's talk more about this with constitutional law expert Pierre de Vos. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the program. So let's talk about the weight of these interviews, because it is not the JSC that will ultimately appoint a Chief Justice. So how much does all of this matter then?
Well, legally it doesn't matter much except in a formal sense, because the Constitution says the President appoints the Chief Justice after consulting the JSC and the leaders of opposition parties, but the President is not bound by any recommendation of the JSC. As I understand it, although the process this time is followed slightly differently, the JSC is really there to advise the President and give their opinion, which is not binding, on whether the candidates are appointable. And so, of course, if they say somebody is not appointable and the President appoint that person, it might not be politically credible or wise, but legally there is no obligation of the President to follow any of the advice of the JSC.
And what ultimately is the marker of a good candidate for the role of Chief Justice? Because when you look at all of the people who are going to be interviewed this week, they're all quite senior within the judiciary and have impressive CVs. We've heard conversations from yesterday about questions to do with dissenting judgments, judgments that agree, how many judgments they've written, and so on is one of the questions that we heard today with the Judge President Mandisa Maya. So what ultimately should be the deciding factor?
Well, there are many factors, so it's really like a basket of factors that you put on a scale and you see, well, if you're going to be taking this decision seriously, you're going to see which candidate has the most points, so to speak, in their basket. What is important to remember is that the Chief Justice has two different jobs, really. The one is he heads the Constitutional Court. He has to be a legal practitioner or who is really competent and excellent intellectually and must lead that court, but he's also the head, or she is the head of the entire judiciary and the office of the Chief Justice. That is a very administrative job. So the Chief Justice also should have extreme administrative skills. And then the issue, of course, that might favor the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Justice Maya, is the Constitution also says that in appointing judges, you have to take into account the need for racial and gender representation in the judiciary. So if that is something that sways you, that will obviously be decisive. But the other factors obviously are also very important in this matter.
And some have said one of the other advantages for her, they believe, is that if she were to be appointed the Judge President Maya, she would be able to serve in the position of Chief Justice for longer than, say, Justice Mlambo, who was interviewed yesterday, and the current acting Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, whose terms will lapse in under 5 years.
Yes, so in countries like the US, this is a huge issue because, of course, once a president appoints a justice or the Chief Justice in the US, that person is there for life. And so they want to make sure that the other party's president is not going to appoint that person. Here, it's maybe less important, but given the instability in the Constitutional Court and in the judiciary, there might be a strong argument to be made that the longer term is better. But once again, it's complicated because one of the problems that constitutional law deals with is that if somebody is in a position of power for a very long time, they might not be exercising their powers as circumspectly as they should. I'm not saying it will happen in a case if somebody who's going to serve long in this case is appointed. But there are arguments on both sides, but I think in the longer term is, in this particular context, quite a persuasive argument, or one of the persuasive factors or factors that will weigh heavily.
Professor Pierre de Vos, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.